Hey, Salvador Briggman here. Welcome back to the Crowdfunding Demystified podcast. And today we are talking about fulfillment. Now, fulfillment is one of those topics that isn't very fun, doesn't have a lot of pizzazz behind it, but I kind of want to bring a little bit more of a lively attitude to this because let's be honest, it's a massive headache and no one likes dealing with fulfillment. So I think it's important that we at least get a little bit of education on it and do it in a fun way. So we're doing like a rapid fire Q&A on fulfillment with a fulfillment expert. And the reason is that at the end of the day, this determines your success, man. Like you're going into a campaign, you raise a boatload of money, but then you got to ship out those products and rewards. And that's when the brand building starts. That's one of the questions I always get is like, when does brand building start? It starts when people actually receive the product, right? Because then they know whether it's good or not. Up until then, it's all a promise. It's all marketing in their mind. Like they don't know how good the product's going to be. But once they get in their hands, they can try it out. They can show their friends. They can take photos, post it on Instagram. That's when brand building happens. So if you mess up and botch fulfillment, it's like you did amazing, but you didn't follow through, right? You didn't do the entire process when it comes to launching a successful Kickstarter or Indiegogo campaign. So that's what we're talking about today is fulfillment. The other quick thing I want to mention is outside of this, we obviously have tons of stuff when it comes to Kickstarter and like educating on that stuff. So one of the great things obviously is my book, The Kickstarter Launch Formula, which you can check out at crowdcrux.com/Kickstarter audio. That link will take you to the Audible version of the Kickstarter Launch Formula. Go and check it out at crowdcrux.com/Kickstarter audio. Spent a lot of time putting that together for you. crowdcrux.com/Kickstarter audio. You can download that, listen to it in the car when you're running, just kind of get that information in your head, right? And make sure you're paying attention to the right stuff. The other quick thing I want to mention is that I'm trying out a new experiment and it's going quite well. So I kind of like to try things out and like do trials and see how things go. And one of my ideas that I had was, what if we created a community within my overall CrowdCrux community? What if we had an insiders club where I just, was able to hold your hand to a much higher degree, and I was able to share insider training and teachings and secrets and tricks that are proven to work to get funding. Kind of all that stuff that takes a lot of time to assemble, like cheat sheets and download blueprints and just kind of forms you can fill out to make it really easy to put together a Kickstarter page or anything leading up to the launch of a new campaign. And I've been doing these workshops and they've been going super well. Like I'm literally surprised at how positive the community is. It's so exciting and it's inspirational to me to have all of these people who are having great experiences and are having, getting results already from joining the community. Like it's so unique. And I want to make that available to you. So if you're interested, go and check it out at crowdcrux.com/mastermind. That link is crowdcrux.com/mastermind, crowdcrux.com/mastermind. That link will take you there. Only leaving it open, I think, for a limited time, or at least when it comes to the pricing, because we want to get a bunch of people in and try it out and make sure everyone has a really good experience. And so far, everyone is. But at some point in time, it's going to get very unwieldy, right? So we're going to have to, I think, increase prices at some point in time. So I'm not sure exactly when you're listening to this, but you can go and check it out there and sort of get insider access to me, as well as tons of these things that I've been sharing for many years that just people aren't aware of when it comes to resources and tools, like all that kind of stuff, as well as new things that are coming out that you might not be aware of that I'm only recently discovering. So kind of getting it fast and quick, great preparation, hand-holding, as well as a positive community. So go and check that out at crowdcrux.com/mastermind. That being said, let's jump right into today's podcast interview and learn how to do fulfillment right. It's coming up right after this. This podcast episode is sponsored by The Gadget Flow. The Gadget Flow reaches over 28 million people, and they've been around since 2012. They are Indiegogo and Kickstarter experts. They featured over 5,000 crowdfunding campaigns, and if you have a technology or design campaign, it is a great platform to generate awareness and get backers. You can check them out at thegadgetflow.com/submit and list your project today. Hey guys, welcome back to the Crowdfunding Demystified podcast. Today we have Brandon on the show, who is the head of marketing at Fulfillrite and also has some really great articles out there on tabletop gaming. He also helps creators when it comes to that subject. So he's super knowledgeable when it comes to fulfillment. He's done his own campaigns, and he kind of wants to come on today's show just to give you like some rapid fire answers to a lot of the common questions with fulfillment. And by that, I mean, when you get a new product and you have people buying it, how do you actually get it to them? And what are some of the intermediary problems and concerns that come up for entrepreneurs and business owners? Brandon, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me on.
Definitely, man. So I kind of want to get right into it, and we could just kind of get to the meat of some of the common questions that I've been getting when it comes to Kickstarter and fulfillment. One of the most common questions I get is, hey, Sal, I see sometimes some of these campaigns have warranties, sometimes they don't. What happens if one of my backers is unhappy and they want to get a return? Like, how do you manually do returns if you're shipping out all of the products yourself from your warehouse or your garage? What's your answer to a question like that?
So depending on the software that you're using, sometimes you can have people go to your website and print off a shipping label, and then they'll package up their own goods and it'll just arrive back at your warehouse or garage based on the postage that's printed out. If you're not using any kind of software to help you facilitate that, then it's a little trickier. You would probably have to actually create a label for them with their address as the from address and your own address as the to address, then send that to them by email.
What kind of software would people be using, do you think, for that?
A lot of your common e-commerce software like Shopify, for example, if you were doing an e-commerce store. Now, some pledge managers might let you do this these days. I don't know. I would actually have to double check that.
Okay. So basically, you're going to have to figure out how to get an order and to fill out the information in terms of where it's going to go, where it's coming from, and either have them print it out physically and have a box to send it into you, or have to try and find a software tool that will help you with that one.
Mm-hmm. And if you're really stuck and you have no idea where you can print postage, one way that works pretty well is you can go to PayPal's website. They've got business tools that let you do this, and you can create the shipping labels online.
Interesting. Is this something that's common, do you know, with Kickstarter campaigns, or do most people not offer returns?
I'm actually thinking about how common returns are. You will get some people. Some people will want to return the reward. Whether or not you actually are on the hook to do it depends on, frankly, just your school of thought on Kickstarters. I would advise you, like, if a backer wants to return their reward, do it and refund them. That's what I think.
Just for the brand element.
Yeah, and my thinking is I've never really seen crowdfunding as too terribly different from e-commerce anyway. And if you bought something and you didn't like it, most stores would let you return it anyway.
Mm-hmm. My thought process would be to be clear on the risks and challenges. And in the risks and challenges section on Kickstarter, you can kind of specify that. Like, you know, we are a small startup company and we can afford one return or two if it's defects in the product. But when it comes to the functionality and what we're doing, there might be changes, and you know, you can say what your philosophy is there. One of the other rapid fire questions I have for you is, when it comes to barcodes, like, is this something you even have to think about if you are shipping out, let's just say 2,000 products? Do you need barcodes for different SKUs? What even, like, is that? How do you keep track of all that?
If you don't plan on getting your item into a store, you arguably don't need to have the barcodes at all. That said, if you want to have it on Amazon or you want to have it in Walmart or any major store, that's when you definitely need the barcodes. Now, SKUs are a little different than the barcodes.
Yeah, could you expand on that?
So basically, a SKU is like, think of it like a social security number for products. Any different kind of product that you have will have a different SKU. You can have a t-shirt, and a blue shirt that's small would be one SKU. A blue shirt that's medium would be one SKU. A red shirt that's small would be a separate SKU, and so on. You will probably need SKUs no matter what you do, and you can literally just make up any string of digits or letters to do that within reason.
So it's kind of like variations of the product a bit.
Yeah, and most people like to try and line up their SKUs and their barcodes to keep things simple.
So if you're going to be playing with the big boys and eventually go the Amazon route or go into retail outlets, you're going to need barcodes. And to start thinking about that, if you're just fulfilling your Kickstarters, it's probably optional, basically.
Now, that said, if you find yourself actually doing better than you think, what you can do is actually have those barcodes printed later and then applied as labels to the back of your product.
Interesting. So that kind of answered my question there. Just to move on real quick, one of the most important things I think when it comes to launching a new product is accessing new markets, right? And one of the common questions I get is, dude, when we're doing like international shipping, how do we even figure that out? What are some of the costs that you might have to be aware of when you're shipping a product to a different country?
That's a really good question. And it's especially complicated because of COVID-19.
Yeah.
But basically, there are three kinds of costs that you're going to run into. There's the shipping price itself, that is the postage and the supplies. Now, if you're shipping something to France or Afghanistan or Russia, pretty much anything outside of US soil from the US, it's going to cost a lot in postage. There is no way around this. And that's one element of it. Depending on where you ship, somebody might have to pay value added taxes, VAT. It's usually like 20% of the cost of the product and perhaps the shipping as well, the postage that is. And then on top of that, you might have customs and duties charges, which are charged based on the type of product that you're shipping.
So are VAT taxes kind of like sales taxes?
Yeah, kind of. Yeah, they're pretty much European sales tax. That's how I like to think of them.
Okay. And then customs and duties. What's the difference between a custom and duty?
I don't actually know.
I don't know either. That's why I'm asking you, man.
I would have to look it up. I bet you it's something really, really technical. And the truth is, I've never seen the finite or the fine little detail matter in day-to-day business, but there's got to be a technical difference.
I know that when it comes to customs, one of them obviously has to do with importing products from a foreign country, right?
Mhm.
And duties are obviously taxes levied on the sale of a product in that country.
Mhm.
So we might have to get back on that one. But do you have any idea of like what those costs or any sense of the impact that might have on the fulfillment or shipping side?
The tricky thing about customs is that it differs based on the type of product and the type of country. So, like, you actually have to go out and find a specialized table based on something called a commodity code. I know there's no easy answer. It's really annoying. but that's what you do. You look up what's called I believe it's an HS commodity code or something very similar to that, and then you go find out what the customs charge for shipping from one country to a certain destination country is. The
Okay, so
key
you
thing
would look that up on the website of the country you're trying to ship to, essentially.
you would look it up on a customs website, and I think we can actually find one that you can link in the show notes.
Yeah, we also have a great guide we've been putting together. I actually was working with Brandon on this checklist that goes through a lot of the nitty gritty when it comes to taxes and shipping and fulfillment and all that stuff and labels and tools you can use. So if we miss something on today's podcast, I'll be sure to include the checklist in the description of this podcast. I think it's fulfillrite.com/checklist, if I'm not mistaken.
That's right.
But yes, okay. So that being said, there are basically these different taxes when it comes to VAT, potentially duties and customs that you should be aware of. And that's just going to be something that you kind of have to factor into the fulfillment costs there, right?
The key thing is that you need to be aware of whether you are going to pay the VAT and the customs or whether your customer is going to pay it.
Interesting. So someone could be on the hook for having to pay a tab they're not aware of, basically, if you didn't think about that properly.
And it can be a very bad customer experience if you're not on top of this, if you don't properly set expectations. Now, there's only two good ways that I know of to handle this in a way that won't irritate backers. Is either you have a warehouse within their country or region, and that means you don't actually incur the VAT or the customs charges, or the alternative that's actually a lot more realistic for most people is you find a warehouse who is able to ship something delivered duty paid. That's what it's called. And that means you just pay the charges on their behalf.
Ahead of time. And then you don't have to worry, the backer doesn't have to worry about it, essentially.
Mm-hmm. That's right.
Okay, so there's two solutions to that. When someone is trying to ship something, let's just say DIY, right? They're trying to do the fulfillment themselves. Maybe they have like 500 products. What postal service should they use? They're like all these USPS, UPS, FedEx, like all these postal services. What one is your kind of default?
The funny thing is that Fulfillrite, they've got a system where it'll basically find the cheapest decent postage that you can use for any given product to go to any given area. And it usually ends up being one of like the same basic 3 or 4 choices. It'll be USPS, which is usually the cheapest for US to US packages. Sometimes FedEx will be cheaper, and they'll do that too. And for international, Ascendia is a good one.
Ascendia?
Mhm. So that one's actually not nearly as well known as a lot of others, but Ascendia is a pretty good, cheap option for shipping internationally.
And when you're shipping internationally, is that going to be usually via air? Or I was hearing that because of COVID, the air rates were like skyrocketing, right? And a lot of people are
Yeah.
having to then do via boat.
So this is where things get like really, really interesting. There was a period of time where there were so many flight cancellations that you couldn't realistically get air freight to go to send packages where you needed them to go. And so what was happening was a lot of these companies were taking air freight and shipping it by sea from like the US to the UK or something like that.
That's going to take a ways while there.
Yeah, and I don't know if that's still what they're doing, but this was definitely very big in March, April, May, when we were all pretty blindsided by this virus.
Yeah. And because obviously the packages are going to go in the belly of what might be like a commercial flight, right?
Mhm.
Yeah. So it's not like they have, they might have some specialized airplanes, I imagine, but you also kind of tack it on.
I
Interesting.
hear actually a lot of what's keeping the commercial airliners up right now is actually compensating for the increased e-commerce.
That is so interesting. Yeah, yeah.
So now you get these weird flights that are like 20 miles long because now they make economic sense. It's the strangest thing.
That's wild. So we talked a little bit about the postal services. When it comes to packaging your product, do most people just do flat rate? Do they do like a normal box and then it's based on the weight? Do they do pouches? Like obviously it's different for the size of the product, but
Mhm.
what are your thoughts on that?
So as a general rule, you want to just find whatever you can ship most cheaply. But like if you had total control over your product and how it was created, I would tell you to try and squeeze the thing into a flat rate USPS box. And that is going to be like the cheapest way that you can ship just about anything. Every once in a while, you'll find that like FedEx or UPS has an option that's cheaper.
If you're worried about the fulfillment and shipping part of your Kickstarter campaign when it comes to getting out all those perks and rewards to your backers, rest assured I've put together a complete Kickstarter fulfillment and shipping checklist for you, and it's free. This is sponsored by the folks at Fulfillrite, and they thought that you should have this checklist as part of your arsenal going into a crowdfunding campaign. If you want to get instant access to this checklist and it's free, you can go to fulfillrite.com/checklist. Again, that is fulfillrite.com/checklist. Fulfillrite.com/checklist. Just go to that link and you can download it immediately.
But it's usually going to be a flat rate USPS mailer.
I had a product I was working on with Fulfillrite, and the guy was struggling a bit with the shipping component. It was like 40 or 50 bucks, which is like crazy, right? And then Fulfillrite actually recommended that they use a pouch. I don't know what kind of like how that is priced out, but it really dramatically decreased the cost of shipping it.
That's really interesting. And this is where I gotta give credit to the guys who are doing the frontline support at Fulfillrite. They're really, really good at being able to deal with strange situations like that. Like they can find you a practical answer to a problem with a lot of variables, whereas I can just kind of say like I'd generally fit it into a flat rate mailer.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense. One of the other things, if you're doing your own fulfillment, you might want to offer some kind of a marketing insert. So anytime that a product comes into contact with a customer, it's an opportunity for branding and it's an opportunity for future potential e-commerce, right? So one would be just doing a marketing insert, maybe give you a discount on future products. Another could be to join a mailing list of some kind or those types of things, right? How do you do like marketing inserts? Do people just like make it on Canva and print it out? Are there services? You know anything about that?
I would say if you're an absolute beginner and you don't know where to start, well, Canva is a good option. That's a good tool for people to look at generally. But I was thinking Vistaprint has some good templates
Hmm.
for how to make some marketing inserts, and they'll print them for you. You can order 100 or 500 and just pop them right in the box.
Well,
Now, that leaves the question of like, what do you put on them? I would say whatever it is that you're trying to get people to do, make a custom web page that is only mentioned on that insert so you know they're coming from the insert,
hmm.
and give them some kind of reason to go to that page in the first place, like a discount on another product or a rebate or something like that.
Another thing, sort of piggyback on that, would be if you want to get super sophisticated and you're using a tool that I recommend, like Lead Pages, you could have people text a phone number, and that phone number will then text back a very specific URL to a landing page. And that way you don't have to worry about people, writing in some kind of a random domain name. They can just text this tool and it will text them back the right landing page for you to segment your audience
Oh,
that way.
wow. That's really good. That might even be better than QR codes too.
I
Yeah, I
like
don't know
QR codes.
which should people find easier. I would actually have to test this. I'm curious now.
Well, I like the texting because, technically you could also sync it up to be able to do text message marketing, right? You'd obviously need the permission of the person, but QR codes are great. Like they will bring up a page on someone's phone, which is useful. A lot of actually restaurants in New York City will use that. If you go to a restaurant, you have a QR code now because they don't have physical menus. But at the same time, you're not getting their contact information for them to be able to access that. So they're just at the page deciding to opt in or not. So, different schools of thought, obviously. So basically, when it comes to fulfillment, one of my questions for you was like, I think there's just a really black box with people not really knowing what they're going to pay for fulfillment. Like, how much does that cost an entrepreneur? I'm always trying to assess, is this worth my time? Is this worth the headache to do it myself or not? So I'll always do these pro con lists when I'm trying to decide, is this something that I want to do in-house for my business, or is it something that I want to delegate, right? So usually I tend to delegate the tasks that I think that someone else would handle faster, that I don't have the experience in solving the problems, and also that's going to make good, financial sense. If it's something that's like a really small order quantity, it might not make sense, obviously, for you to outsource it. So I kind of want to drill into like who should consider outsourcing, what is the cost going to be, and those kinds of things a little bit.
So here's a good way to start thinking about it. There's basically four kinds of costs that you're going to run into when you outsource to a fulfillment center. There is account/storage fees, relatively flat. And that's a fixed amount that's going to be withdrawn from your account just by merit of using the service.
For the
You have,
inventory.
yeah, just because you have inventory that is taking up space that could be occupied by other inventory. The other one, or the next one, is order fees. So every time an order comes in, you're going to incur some amount of charge in order to have that order processed. The next fee is postage, and then there are extras. This is anything like you want a marketing insert added, something like that. So account fees at Fulfillrite, I'd actually need to double check our pricing sheet on that, but I know it's not high. But per order, it's like depending on how many you have come in, Fulfillrite ranges from about $1.50 to about $2. They'll give you up-to-date prices on the website, but that's close enough to get the idea. And then after that, you get postage at a cheaper rate than you would be able to buy on your own. So the key factor here is you want to outsource when one of two things is true. One, it's a pain for you to do your own fulfillment, like it is running up your labor costs or it's just eating up all your time. And at that point, it will certainly be easier, and it might actually end up being cheaper to outsource it. And the other one is that, yeah, actually, no, I that's the main one. You want to do it whenever fulfilling your own orders becomes too much of a pain,
Yeah.
or when you find that it's actually cheaper to save on labor that way.
One of the concepts that this kind of draws in my mind is, so I studied econ, right? And honestly, I declared my econ major like the last year of my college. Right? But like one of the really key concepts to this was opportunity cost.
Yes.
Everyone has their own level of opportunity cost. So you could just take, for example, if you have a full-time job or you've worked before, what your salary is and like work that out to what your hourly wage is, right? So you could assume like what is the opportunity cost, number one, from an hourly wage perspective of you fulfilling all these orders over the course of a week or 2 weeks, right? And really spending a lot of time doing that. What is that really going to cost you in terms of your labor? Number two is the opportunity cost of what you can be doing in the meantime, which as a business owner, you could be thinking of new product ideas. You could be hiring new people to help with your team. You could be doing more marketing to bring in more sales, right? So the worst thing is to, I think, get your ego involved and think, oh, I should do this myself. It's really about figuring out what is the best use of your time and the opportunity cost of that, right?
Outsourcing fulfillment is probably one of the easiest ways to get leverage once you cross a certain threshold. And I would say, as a general rule, if you are shipping more than 100 orders a month, it's probably time to let somebody else take care of them for you. Your life will get a lot easier.
Well said. So we went through a lot of different micro questions here. My last one for you is this idea of sales taxes, because sales taxes is something that I don't think has been covered very well when it comes to the Kickstarter niche. It's something that's a bit of a gray area. And also, Kickstarter's functionality does not let you collect sales taxes. What are your thoughts on this?
Okay, so let's just start by saying this. If you're talking about taxes of any kind, you need to talk to an accountant, or at a bare minimum, check out your state, county, and city resources to figure out all the different taxes that you might have to pay. Now, at this point, I'll just tell you how it works for me in the state of Tennessee as I presently understand it. And I have people that help me make sure that I don't screw this up too. On any sale I make to somebody who lives within my state, 7.25% has to go to the state. And then another 2 to 2.5% has to go to the county or to the city that I live in. Now, I've got this set up in such a way that when I personally sell items, Shopify will collect relevant sales taxes when I need it, and it will go into QuickBooks where I will be able to pay it through basically automated means to the state and the county and the city. And I recommend for anybody who's doing like any kind of serious selling, like look into automating this if you can. Now, unfortunately, Kickstarter won't actually let you do this. So the next best thing you can do is just get an export of all your backers, get all their addresses, and filter down by the relevant, basically by the relevant states and cities that you will owe taxes for based on your laws. If you're not sure like whether you owe taxes on something, a really easy way to check is like if you got a trial Shopify store set up, make a fake, or like do all the configuration, get your store set up, and do a trial order to the exact same address you've collected in Kickstarter, and see if Shopify wants to charge sales tax on it.
That's actually, I think, be really helpful. And one of the good exercises, I think, as well, if you're eventually going to go into e-commerce, you get to know Shopify's interface, right, a little bit early, which could be a plus as well.
Exactly.
So we've covered a lot of different topics here. I just kind of want to also shed a tiny bit of light on like where your passion is, right? Because you got started with your board game blog, which I think you're an awesome writer, man. And then you started working with Fulfillrite, right? And we've been talking for a while now. Can you just share with listeners a little bit about your passion when it comes to tabletops and some of the stuff you've been doing there?
I'm trying to think about how I even word my passion at this point. Okay, so this is going to sound vague and, God, maybe even pretentious, who knows, but I'm just going to go for it. I like taking ideas, refining them, crafting them, and sharing them. I know that you're like, well, what on earth does that actually mean? I like taking a game that is rough, but that's got some spark to it, something clever to it, and getting it to be like a finished product, get it to look like a good campaign page. In another scenario, I like taking a book that's in like final galley and then getting it out to readers. This is what I like doing. I like taking good ideas and getting them out to the right people.
Yeah, I mean, I think it makes sense because the flip side of that is that people have amazing ideas and it goes nowhere, right? And I'm sure you've had a lot of people who have a really big, like grand idea and are so excited about it. And then you talk to them a year later and it's like, what happened with that? And it just kind of fizzled out, right? And I would
Yeah.
go through this myself, just so much frustration of like my own ideas and not knowing how to execute on them. And once I think you unlock the ability to plan, to be able to market and sell, to be able to do the logistical fulfillment side and the manufacturing and everything, suddenly you have this whole skill set, which allows you to not only ship out your own ideas, but also to ship out other people's, right?
Mhm.
And it's such a valuable thing. And it's so cool to be able to watch as you almost like bend reality a bit. And someone who has never had this product before or played this game before, they get to play it with their family. They get to play it with their friends and bond over it. And it's like you actually impacted that other person a little bit and they can be around the world, right?
Yeah, and that's what gets me going, really, because it's like creators give me just this kind of energy. I just feel like when I talk to people who are doing these exciting things, I just want to, I want to help them refine it and turn it into something, into the best thing it possibly could be. This is actually why Fulfillrite's a cool gig, because you're like, well, it's just shipping, right? Yeah, but it's getting the physical manifestation of something, of an idea, into people's hands.
Yeah, I think when we're growing up, we take a lot of these services for granted, honestly. And when you actually begin to pull back the curtain and understand how our whole society and whole economy works, it's super cool. It's so fascinating. All the stuff that's happening at the same time. And the fact that you can actually participate in that and you can bring a product to market and you can impact other people. And it doesn't take rocket scientists to be able to do it. Like to me, that is just so freaking exciting.
If you want something that kind of opens your eyes into what logistics actually really does for the world, there's this YouTube channel called Wendover Productions, and they just love aviation and logistics. Like this is their whole thing, and they do these 15-minute videos on some really specific subject, and they help you realize, like, yeah, what Amazon manages to do with their logistics network is actually pretty extraordinary, or how American Airlines sets their prices is actually pretty extraordinary.
There's so many things happening behind
Price
what seem like
effective.
very easy to do things, right? And that kind of magic. So really interesting. Do you have any things you'd like to leave the viewers with? I know there's the checklist. Maybe you could tell them a little bit about the checklist that I've been working on for a while, and now we finally got out there to people.
So one of the things that I find incredibly disorienting if you've never used Kickstarter, there's this whole culture and you're having to learn business processes at the same time. It's just confusing. Like, where do you even begin? This checklist is our attempt to say to people, okay, you've got this idea. Here is everything that you need to know to take your finished idea and make a decent Kickstarter out of it. That's what that checklist is about. And we've done a similar one for Shopify too. It's like, okay, now you want to set up a store. Here's everything you need to do in order to go from having that store idea and turning it into an actual store.
One of my other frustrations, I guess I have a lot of frustrations in my life.
I think we all do right now.
One of my other frustrations was reading business books that are just very vague and go around the point and beat around the bush, and they never actually tell you anything, right? So with my books, I kind of made the decision to go the other way, which is just be super practical, right? And keep it like slim volume. So what I like about the checklist is it really just goes straight to the meat, right? It goes straight to the content, tells you exactly what you got to know step by step, and just shares all the resources for you. Like none of this fluff, none of this, you got to buy a course to be able to get access to this. It's literally, you can just download it, you can download it for free, right?
What gets people, it's not taking somebody who's made a small success and turning it into a bigger success, although that is a formidable challenge in its own right. What crushes people is just making their first 10 grand. What I like to do, instead of talking in like lofty MBA kind of principles or making a book like that, I like to say, okay, let's talk about like how you can make $1,000, or let's talk about how you can ship 100 units of this product. Now, when I have one-on-one conversations, I like to get really specific. When you're not talking one-on-one, I try and get as close as we possibly can. Our checklist is our attempt to do that.
Yeah, definitely. The more realistic that you can make it and the more bite-sized, I think just the easier it is to execute on a lot of this. And to be honest, like you think about a seasoned e-commerce store owner, the only difference between them and you, besides coming up with products and being willing to put themselves out there and sell it, is just the experience and the knowledge that they've accumulated. And what if you could, rather than going through years of experience, just download all of the important stuff you got to know into your head with one simple checklist and not even remember, just go off and check it item by item by item, right?
Mhm.
So that was my goal when working with you to get this together. I really sincerely hope that people find it to be helpful. I think you're going to also send them some other stuff, right? Some emails and some good content if they decide to download that. So I'll include the link to that in the show description. But thank you for coming on, answer some of these rapid fire questions that I have for you. If people have more, make sure you guys can email me. I'll forward it to Brandon. And I really appreciate some of the time you spent here today.
Thank you again for having me on. And thank you all for listening.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Crowdfunding Demystified podcast. My name is Salvador Briggman, and it has been my entire career and life's work to teach about crowdfunding. Like, I got started in the early days in 2012 in this industry. I've been blogging and educating ever since. And it's always been my passion to empower other people to figure this thing out, because to me, it's always still, I think, a big puzzle. Like, why do people buy new products? What gets people interested in them? How do you get strangers to back your Kickstarter or your crowdfunding campaign or your Indiegogo campaign, right? And it's been my life's work to figure out the answers to some of these very difficult questions and to really spend a lot of time figuring out the best tools and tactics and strategies and the ways you can get funding and separating the BS, let's be honest, from what's actually real and proven to work. So it's really been my life's work. And I think when I was getting started in my early days, it was a lot about ego and wanting to figure it out for myself, right? And wanting to really know the secrets when it comes to crowdfunding. But as I've gotten older and much more mature, when I think back on the moments that are most exciting for me, it's not when I've had an achievement of some kind, right? It's not really when I launched a new book or a new course or those kind of things. They're cool. They're really fun to do. And I love teaching, obviously. But for me, the best moments in my career are when I see a student experience success, right? Or I see someone who I'm working with really knock it out of the park with their crowdfunding campaign. To me, that's exciting. There's nothing better than that. Seeing the smile on someone's face, you're on a Zoom call, you're on a Skype call, right? And you see them just so ecstatic and happy about it. And it's almost like in that moment, they recognize what's possible for their business, for their career, for their future life. They realize, wow, we just figured something out that so many people out there want this product or want this thing that I've made. I'm not gonna lie to you, that's inspirational. That's inspirational to me. And it's one of the reasons why I am so passionate about educating in this industry. And I continually want to bring to you the latest cutting edge tactics and strategies so that you can be that next success story, so that you can come on the podcast and you can share with everyone what worked for you. And it's kind of like this great karmic cycle, right? It's just great people who are experiencing success, then coming back on the podcast, and then more people hear that, and then more people experience success. And we're really just creators helping creators. It's really cool. I love it. I love that. So if you want to get access to some of the stuff I've discovered over the years, as well as recently, that has proven to work in terms of getting backers to your campaign, really knocking it out of the park, as I say, smashing your goal on Kickstarter, go and check out the link I'm about to mention, crowdcrux.com/mastermind. That link is crowdcrux.com/mastermind, crowdcrux.com/mastermind. Every single day, we're going through life and we're making choices. You're making choices in terms of what you choose to eat, how you choose to spend your time, the different luxuries that you're maybe spending some money on, whether that's a watch or a nice pair of sneakers. And all too often, as business owners, we forget to invest in ourselves. We are the ones who are responsible for all of the results, right? When it comes to the business, we're the ones who are responsible for building the future. And yet we don't invest in ourselves. I think that's something that has to change. I think that's something where investing in giving yourself access to the right information, the right teachers, the right mentors, the right tools is literally what can separate, in the olden days, someone who is successful from someone who's not. But nowadays, because of the internet, literally anyone can get access just for the price of an admission ticket. Why wouldn't you? Why wouldn't you give yourself the best chance that's possible? It's a no-brainer, but at the same time, I can think of so many times in my life where I've been hesitant to invest in myself because I've been scared, or I've been worried, or I've been concerned. And I'll tell you, every time that I have, it's led to just this massive boost and upshoot in my career, and I'm so glad that I did that. And I learned these things faster because that's really the only way in which you're going to get results faster. Anyway, thank you so much for listening to this podcast. I appreciate you so much, man. Leave me a rating and review on iTunes, please, if you are listening to it there, or leave a comment below on this YouTube video if you did enjoy it. Thank you so much, and I'll see you next time.